Hello everyone, it's Brian. Thanks for stopping by. Let's talk about books today. This video is inspired by Mama's Records, Mad for Vinyl, and Stephen Carlson, and maybe others that I'm unaware of who have made short videos discussing 3 and sometimes 4 books. So I'm going to talk about 3 books. One that I read quite recently, one from a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago, and one from over 2 decades ago. So let's get going. Hopefully I can keep this under 5 minutes. We'll see about that. So the first book is a book I didn't know about until I saw it mentioned on Mazzy's channel. That's Norman Maslov. I have a pretty good Leonard Cohen collection, but somehow I missed this one. This came out in 2022. It's called Who by Fire? Leonard Cohen in the Sinai, written by Maddie Friedman. So as I said, this came out in 2022. Now, it's long been known that Leonard Cohen went to the Sinai desert right after Egypt launched an attack against Israel in 1973. So when that happened, Leonard Cohen made the bizarre decision to actually go to Israel. It's never been clear why he went, what his state of mind was. There was some suggestions that maybe he had retired from being a musician. So we don't really know, and there's not very much written about it. As is pointed out in this book, if you're trying to find information about that time period in Leonard Cohen's life, there isn't much available. So for this book, he relies on some first-person accounts, some people who were there, or some people who knew people who were there, and also on an unpublished Leonard Cohen manuscript. I gather it's a brief manuscript that's housed at McMaster University. That's about an hour's drive from where I live. Leonard Cohen's personal papers are actually in the Rare Book Library at the University of Toronto, which is like a half-an-hour cycle for me to get there. But his publisher's papers are at McMaster University in Hamilton, and so he was allowed to look at that manuscript, and he includes part of it in this book. Again, not entirely helpful because it's not very detailed and it's hard to separate fact from fiction. But what I can say about this is that for a period of time that's really unknown in Leonard Cohen's life, there's some light been shed on it, but I'm left with the feeling that somehow more could be known. So Leonard sort of appears as kind of like this ghostly figure operating on the fringes of this book, because it contextualizes his visit based on the larger military operation that was happening. So you get that context of the military, what was happening in Israel on all the fronts, and then you get Leonard reporting to be here or there. Apparently he wrote a song here, he wrote something there. So it's kind of still leaves a lot of questions and unsatisfying in that respect. But again, this is probably the best account we'll ever get of that, and he did a good job of putting together those pieces of information to try and come up with a coherent narrative of what was happening at that period of time. So I guess it's the best we'll ever know about, or the most we'll ever know about Leonard Cohen in the war that started on Yom Kippur. So that I read last week. Finished last week. This one I read maybe 3 to 4 years ago. It came out in 2018. That is Jeff Tweedy's memoir, Let's Go So We Can Get Back. Subtitle is A Memoir of Recording and Discording with Wilco, etc. So as with most memoirs or autobiographies, this one covers like essentially birth to the present, going through the music, the substance abuse issues, which I was totally unaware of. I had no idea. I consider myself a Wilco fan. I have Wilco records and CDs. I didn't know about that. And his love life, so family life right through. It's not terribly deep or thought-provoking, but it is what you gather, just a memoir of his life. Very easy to read, and for me, it was interesting because I didn't really know anything about him. I only knew the recorded information. I didn't know anything about his personal life, so I found it that interesting. But for Wilco fans, something you would probably want to read. I was going to keep this under 5 minutes, but that might not work. The last book I wanted to mention came out in 1999, so I read it over 20 years ago. And, I eventually will do a longer video about this artist, one of my favorite artists, and that's John Cale. This is his autobiography called What's Welsh for Zen, co-written by Victor Bockrus. So what's Welsh for Zen, because John Cale was actually born in Wales. Welsh was his first language, English being his second language. I would make the claim that John Cale is probably the most underappreciated recording artist in our lifetime. Absolutely true. There's no question in my mind that he's most underappreciated. Co-founder of the Velvet Underground with Lou Reed, Sterling Morrison, Maureen Tucker, record producer in his own right, having produced the Stooges' first record, for example. Nico, Patti Smith, Susie and the Banshees record, the list goes on. A multi-instrumentalist, someone who has worked in many different genres, starting with the avant-garde movement in the 1960s in New York with people like Lamont Young and Tony Conrad. And then right through rock music, his solo career, we have those classic 3 records from the 70s, Fear, Helen of Troy, and Slow Dazzle being the high marks. Then a whole series of soundtrack recordings, piano-based soundtrack recordings, moody atmospheric pieces. Work with people like Brian Eno with the album Wrong Way Up, reuniting with Lou Reed for songs for Drella. Just an incredible output, and he has a new record coming out very soon. I would say underappreciated, but let me just say a couple things about the book first before I make another comment. It's pretty well done. There's like an essay here from a backup singer. There's lots of photographs, visual memorabilia, dating back all through the years, through the Lou Reed years, etc. And I said he was underappreciated. I would also suggest a little overshadowed. For example, if we were to look at the first couple of sentences in this book, which I will read to you if you bear with me. I was born on 9 March 1942 in Garnant, so he's now 80, between Swansea and Carmarthen, South Wales. Some 3,000 miles away in Brooklyn, New York, Lewis Reed had been born 1 week earlier on the 2nd. I always knew he had an edge on me, so I would say underappreciated, but probably felt a little overshadowed or second fiddle perhaps to Lou Reed in many cases. Lou Reed looms large in this book. So again, only to 1999. So after that, we have 23 more years of John Cale's music, which is some really incredible music that's come out. I'm thinking of Black Acetate, Homo Sapiens. I'm looking forward to the new record. So I won't say, I'm over 7 minutes. I thought this would be 5 minutes. But if you have even a passing interest in the Velvet Underground or John Cale, I recommend this, with the only caveat being that the last 23 years are not covered. It's only to 1999, but still a really interesting read, and I would really recommend this for you John Cale fans. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.